I'm giving you all the information that's most of interest to you. So please don't feel like you need to wait and hold a question. Please don't feel like if you want more.
We forget, so that's a good system.
Great. Well, again, I just raise your hand up so I can see you, and I will try to make sure I'm watching to stop. So, let's see. All right. So, the first thing that I want to mention is diving right into, to these takeaways. We want to look at the health and wellness category. So what you're going to see here is we look at 5 different areas: a strong start, birth outcomes primarily, family economic security, nurturing homes and communities, and high quality education. And health and wellness. There's 3 key takeaways from these different areas that we're going to talk about in Scotland County. That first area is health and wellness. Over the past 10 to 12 years, we've seen improvements in the percentage of children in Scotland County with health insurance. That is consistent across the state. That does not take into effect Medicaid expansion, which passed a couple of years ago. Medicaid expansion is not for children, but what we've seen in 40 other states is that when Medicaid expansion passed, children of adults who got insurance through that expansion also ended up enrolled. So we expect that number to actually go up next year whenever we have data that accounts for that rise in enrollment. So all of that looking really good. Not looking really good is that we're seeing so many children across our state who are struggling with mental health, and we are in a youth mental health crisis. In 2023, only about 4%, or excuse me, I'm on the wrong, okay. More North Carolina youth are struggling with negative emotions that are precursors to self-harm and suicide now in North Carolina. And in 2023, about 4 in 10 North Carolina high schoolers reported consistent and persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness to the point that it disrupted their normal day-to-day life for 2 or more weeks at a time. Now, I want to stop here and add that a lot of times when we're talking about the youth mental health crisis, I'll get questions about, well, are people just calling it that now because they didn't know what depression was 20, 30 years ago? They're not, because we've been tracking scores around loneliness and isolation and feelings of sadness for 20, 30 years. And I feel like it's safe to say that my generation growing up knew what sadness was too. And so we know that these rates are getting significantly worse, even taking away terminology like depression and anxiety. Yes?
What you have to say, just say it.
It has to do with me trying to marry my slides with my paper and not doing a very good job at it. So I want to thank you for flagging that for me. So other data has shown us that we've seen a substantial increase in children who are diagnosed with anxiety or depression. And so those are children who are diagnosed by a medical professional. Between 2016 and 2023, the number of children with anxiety or depression more than doubled in our state. And this increase was more than twice the percentage increase that we saw nationally over the same time. In 2023, about 386,000 North Carolina children had been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, and that's certainly an undercount given the areas of our state that are lacking medical professionals that would provide those diagnoses. Because these children, these are children that have been diagnosed, we know that also that thousands of children across the state are not living in areas where they're able to get the necessary health care that they would get because of that diagnosis. Youth suicides at the state level have also risen sharply over the last decade. In 2023, there were 4 youth suicides per every 100,000 children in North Carolina. The number of youth suicides in 2023 was more than double the number in 2010. And it's not just high schoolers. The number of suicides among children ages 10 to 14, middle school, was 4 times higher in 2023 than in 2010. Right now, suicide is the second leading cause of death for children ages 10 to 14. So numbers like these are why youth mental health is such a focus for us at NC Child. Yes, sir.
When you're talking about the younger children committing suicide, when you're talking about the suicide among the younger kids, then school is
How's that? For the fourth time. When you're talking about the suicides among the younger students, what are the primary means? Is it drugs or guns or what?
I can't give you the exact answer to that. I would have to go back and find that out. What I can tell you is that the only other cause of death among our youth, well, let me back up and put it this way. So NC Child is also a part of the Child Fatality Task Force for the state, and the Child Fatality Task Force has tracked child death means for several, again, a couple of decades now. Over the last decade, we've seen almost every cause of child death, accidental death, abuse, etc. We've seen all of that go down except for 2 causes. And some of these are interchangeable. One is suicide. The other is gun death. Gun death is the other area that has gone up. So I do not know the percentage of overdose deaths versus firearms. That's information I'd have to go back and find out for you. But I can tell you that gun deaths among children have significantly risen over the last decade in line with the suicide increase. Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Thank you. So once again, advocating for youth mental health supports in schools and communities is a major focus area for NC Child. We have a lot of deserts, a lot of healthcare deserts in the state, particularly with regard to mental health. And so we're trying to make sure that our schools have the resources that they need in order to help these kids. So any other questions around youth mental health before I kind of shift us a little? All right. So in the high quality education category, so I really wanted to highlight the high school graduation and 3rd grade reading proficiency rates. I know this is of particular interest because when I was here a couple years ago, I learned that you all have this really phenomenal program with the elementary school next door. Sycamore, thank you. This is directly impacted by work that you all are doing. Scotland County's high school graduation rate is actually a bright spot compared to the state's rate overall. Now, 3rd grade reading proficiency rates still lag behind pre-pandemic rates and North Carolina as a whole. So high school graduation rates. In the 2024 to 25 school year, about 91% of Scotland County's seniors graduated high school within 4 years, which is slightly higher than the state's 88% average. Scotland County's high school graduation rate has bounced around a bit in the last recent years, but it does show a rather steady increasing trend line, meaning, that the county's made some progress in recent years. The state, on the other hand, has remained relatively flat for the past 10 years. 3rd grade reading proficiency rates, on the other hand, tell a different story. In the 2023 to 24 school year, only 31% of Scotland County 3rd graders scored proficient or higher on the end of grade reading exam. Like all school districts across the state, 3rd grade reading proficiency in the county saw a really big drop in the first year after COVID shut down school systems. But while the state overall has gained some ground since then, Scotland has remained basically at the level it dropped to immediately after the pandemic. Third grade reading is so important because it can help predict a student's achievement later in life. Now, students not reading at grade level in the third grade or at 8 years old will find it harder to catch up later, which can increase the likelihood that they don't graduate from high school and reduce their lifetime earnings as they get out of school. Yes, ma'am.
So does that mean we're graduating high schoolers that can't read? Do you have figures on the EOC scores from high school and what those look like in Scotland County?
It does not. It does not mean we're graduating those that can't read. It's the difference in the years. So when we look back at third grade proficiency in 2019, you can see here it was 40%. And so it was higher for those, even further back than that, for those students who are graduating now.
I didn't mean that possibly.
Oh, no, yeah.
Do you have EOC scores for high school, the high school English 4, or whenever it's the last day that take EOC?
I believe that we do have that tracking information, but I don't know it. That is something that we can get and answer some of those questions. But it would also be dishonest to say that statewide we do know that we have high school graduates that aren't prepared for the next steps.
Scared to say if the standard's been lowered.
I taught third grade for a long time, and so I've seen the ups and downs in that, and I know we've never recovered from COVID in most areas. So
There were relaxed standards for high school graduation following COVID. I am not an expert in that area, and I'm not prepared to speak as such, so I don't want to imply anything with my statement, but there were some standards that were switched around for kids who were not able to be in school.
And I'm sorry if I'm implying the standards have been lowered. I think that we do. I think schools do the best job they can and do an excellent job considering everything that they do. So, I really do.
Yes, sir.
Is there any correlation between the dropout rate in high school and the graduation rate?
Oh, yeah, I mean, yes, 100%. So those students who are dropping out are a part of that, that 9%. They're either,
Do they bring our graduation level up because they're no longer part of the system?
no, it's students who are graduating on time. So if they drop out in the 10th grade, they are part of that 9%. Excuse me. Of course, there are a number of interventions that improve literacy rates, which school districts are deploying to get third grade reading proficiencies back up to pre-COVID levels. But we also know that high quality education starts early, and that research shows going to high quality childcare centers can contribute to gains in things like third grade reading. And I know we have a former third grade teacher here, so I'm not calling on you, but I do imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you can attest that children who either had those high quality early education opportunities or had parents who were able to provide them with those early opportunities, tended to do better by the third grade. We do know that right now, unfortunately, families are struggling to both access and afford care across the state. Scotland County's childcare system doesn't even serve all of the children who have working parents in the county, let alone every young child. So only about half of children under the age of 6 with all parents in the home working or looking for work in Scotland County are enrolled in licensed childcare. And these are only the kids with working parents. Enrollment compared to the total number of children under the age of 6 in the counties is even more out of whack. Only about 1/3 of all Scotland County kids under 6 are enrolled in licensed childcare. Childcare programs in the county are licensed for far more slots than they enroll, but providers' challenges hiring and retaining staff to operate at full capacity can really limit the number of kids that they can serve. So because of this lack of childcare supply and high costs that parents face, some parents are forced to drop out of the labor force because they can't find or afford care for their kids. Data shows us that there were about 100,000 fewer parents of young children in North Carolina's labor force in 2024 than in 2019. We published a report last year with the U.S. Chamber and NC Chamber Foundations that found that about 35% of parents who experienced employment disruptions reported leaving the workforce because of childcare issues. So beyond developmental impacts that childcare has for children, the workforce issues they pose have a huge immediate economic impact on counties. The Chamber Foundation's economic impact analysis found that issues in childcare cost our state economy $565 billion per year. Most of that $565 billion is the economic cost to businesses from turnover and worker absenteeism, which adds up to about $429 billion per year. The rest is what we're missing out on in state revenue, which you can see cause us to forego an estimated $1.36 billion per year in revenue collections. I want to be very clear that $1.36 billion in revenue is far more than we would actually need to ensure that every child in North Carolina has the opportunity to get into a high-quality early learning program. As a follow-up to the Chamber report, we partnered with the North Carolina Department of Commerce to look at how addressing childcare could benefit the workforce and grow the economy. We found that solving these issues for parents could increase our state's GDP by up to $7.5 billion a year and add up to 60,000 jobs to our economy. So obviously that is a huge impact, and it's one that we're missing out on if we don't support our childcare system and ensure that children and families have access to high-quality care that facilitates children's development and allows parents to work and provide for their families. So our third and final takeaway this morning is from the family economic security category, which I'll note does tie in quite nicely with the difficulty parents are having getting care so that they can go to work. I really want to touch on the percentage of children who are living in poor and low-income homes in Scotland County and children's food insecurity. So Scotland County has the highest percentage of children living in low-income homes out of all of the counties in our state, and has seen persistent and rising childhood food insecurity as a result. So first, children living in low-income homes. Families with low incomes earn wages. Families with low incomes earn wages that are below 200% of the federal poverty line. And so that's about $60,000 for a family of 4 in 2023. In Scotland County, more than about 2/3, about 69% of children live in households that earn less than this amount. As you can see on the slide, this percentage has Scotland County tied for the highest of all counties in North Carolina, and this rate has not changed much over the years. About a decade ago, Scotland County's percentage of children in low-income homes was still about 70%. For comparison, this percentage at the state level overall is about 40%, and North Carolina's rate has fallen steadily over the last 10 years. Now, while we haven't seen much change in this indicator in Scotland County, it's become harder for families to meet the basic needs of children as the prices of necessities have steadily risen. This has placed considerable strain on families to provide for their children, especially lower income households. Gas, vehicles, housing, groceries, childcare have all increased considerably over the last few years. The price of food is up by about 1/3 since 2016, and this has increased by about 27% since 2019 alone. And these higher food prices have been seen of the most difficult for parents to grapple with. So because these higher food prices have really contributed to a spike in child food insecurity in Scotland County and across the state in recent years, In 2023, more than a third of children in Scotland County lived in households that did not have consistent access to adequate and nutritious foods, up from about 20% just a couple years ago. Recent inflationary spikes in food prices have increased Scotland County's food insecurity rate to levels above what we saw in the years immediately following the Great Recession. There are more kids in Scotland County going hungry today than there were during one of the deepest economic downturns that we saw in this country in the last several decades. And this is data from 2023. We know that federal changes will make it more difficult for children and families to access SNAP benefits and change requirements that will limit access to food assistance for families that need it the most. Some of those changes will happen sooner than others, but the funding shift that North Carolina will now be responsible for will take effect next year and in 2027. It's going to cost the state $427 million to keep SNAP benefits going, starting in 2027. We're working with our partners at DHHS and the General Assembly to work towards solutions that will ensure food assistance that puts healthy meals on the tables for hundreds of thousands of North Carolina children every month to make sure that that will remain. In addition to food insecurity, areas with lower incomes and higher child poverty also tend to have higher incidence of child abuse. Neglect is the top cause of child abuse and maltreatment in North Carolina, and the conditions that can lead to findings of child neglect can stem from poverty and low incomes. In Scotland County, child abuse assessment rates per 1,000 kids, or the number of child abuse cases local county Department of Social Service offices investigate and find substantiated cases of child abuse for, are far higher than the state overall. Rates of investigated child abuse are 2 times higher in Scotland County than at the state level. Child welfare social workers don't always find substantiated cases of child abuse following an investigation, but in Scotland County, rates of substantiated cases are much higher. 2023, there were about 22 substantiated cases of child abuse per 1,000 children in Scotland County, about 3 times higher than North Carolina's 7 substantiated cases per 1,000 kids. Other data shows us that children are spending longer periods of time in foster care after they enter the child welfare system, and there are not enough spots at foster care homes for children to have safe placements. That's resulted in children in foster care across the state sleeping in county administrative offices, emergency rooms, or hotels because there aren't enough foster homes for them to stay at. Children in foster care are in some of the most vulnerable positions in our state. In most cases, they have left traumatic circumstances for an unfamiliar one. Having to sleep in office buildings or emergency rooms or some other unstable placement can deepen that trauma. There is a lot that we can do to prevent children from entering the child welfare system to begin with by helping to meet families' needs, financial and otherwise. But there are also steps that we can take to improve children's experiences while they're in the child welfare system and help them reach a stable, permanent living situation without furthering trauma. So thank you all so very much for your yes, sir.
Yeah, child mortality figures.
We do. Do we have those on the data cards this year? They are. I am not looking at, Nina, can you? Thank you. We have 93.8 deaths per 100,000 children as of 2023 in Scotland County.
Compared to the states.
1 second, sir. Thank you, 58.7. So it's significantly higher here in Scotland County.
Is Smart Start still active?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it is. And we do partner very closely with them. They are, I don't have a negative word to say. Actually, I think that they're one of the best resources that we have to really address so many of these issues.
Excuse me. What constitutes child abuse? Can you describe that for me?
This is another one of those places where I'm not a social worker, And so I want to be careful how I answer that. But physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect all fall into those cases that are referenced. So when we're talking about neglect, what I can do is give you kind of some examples of that. If a child is going malnourished, if a child doesn't have access to meeting their hygienic needs, those are the kinds of things that would come up as neglect. If a child is in a home where there is significant substance abuse, that's something that would definitely be a neglect case. But I cannot answer that in depth, not being a social worker.
If they're left alone at home.
Thank you.
Sometimes the bus lets them home and the door's locked and they live upstairs.
Thank you.
Scotland County is one of the counties that have children sleeping in the administrative offices also.
I think we're actually at a point where most counties are experiencing that. It is some of the anecdotal stories that we've heard from DSS directors that we work with are disturbing. So obviously Scotland County and the state as a whole face a lot of challenges, but they are challenges that can be addressed. Addressing the problems that I've described today is exactly what NC Child exists to do. So we sift through all the data, we talk to children and families, and we do our best to understand the issues that children and families are facing. And we develop policies that can respond to these challenges and foster opportunities for all of North Carolina's children. So whether that's equipping our schools with the staff and the resources to respond to rising mental health concerns among children, supporting our child care system so children have a strong foundation to learn from, or ensuring families have access to financial resources and assistance to provide for the necessities for their children. Our purpose at NC Child is to create a North Carolina where every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential. We could not do that without the support of folks like you in this room who care so deeply about the children in your community and across the state. So I appreciate the time that you've given me to walk you through all of this. I would love to take some time now. It's our research director's email address, so if you have difficult questions, I encourage you to ask him. In fact, just do that. But I want to take some time with you now, answer additional questions that you might have, but I also want to take a little bit of time. What we like to do when we're in communities is make sure that there's not these big pieces that we're missing. So we host formal focus groups on a lot of our issue areas around, for example, parents with children with special needs on Medicaid coverage, or, we do youth mental health focus groups with youth, with school personnel. We do a lot of that type of work. But what we also find is that if we're not just being really open to listen to all of those different thoughts, we miss pieces. And so what I want to do, in addition to answering any questions that you all have, is I want to pose back a few questions to all of you. So first, though, I'm going to stop. Are there any other questions related to the data?
How ready is the state legislature to hear you?
Well, that is a complicated question, and it depends on the area. Yes, sir. Can I go issue by issue? Because I think that'll get to that a little bit better. So when it comes to youth mental health, we have a lot of bipartisan support for addressing the youth mental health crisis. The part of the problem is, in order to effectively address the youth mental health crisis, you have to have investment. So, for example, we can't make sure that our kids have access when they're in the school system to support if they're in crisis if we don't have social workers and nurses and psychologists and counselors available in our schools. Right now, North Carolina only has enough social work, compared to national recommendations, we have only 1 in 4 of the number of school social workers that we would need to adequately meet needs. The same for psychologists. We only have enough counselors to meet about 50% of what the need is recognized to be. So there is support in the legislature for addressing the youth mental health crisis. But to address the youth mental health crisis, one of the primary things we need to do is provide more funding for more school health support personnel positions. That's a lot of money. We don't have a budget right now. The state has not yet passed a budget. And so a lot of those things are held up. In addition to that, we also have a situation where for some of those positions, we have workforce pipeline issues. We don't have enough psychologists in North Carolina to take those roles. But for social workers, for example, we have enough social workers being graduated to take those roles. But we can't even get enough to fill the roles that we have right now because we're paying them at a level that doesn't come close to what their private pay or their pay within a local government could be. So we're asking them to take on these really intense situations with kids, a lot of this crisis management, helping a child that is considering taking their own life, helping children who are dealing with these traumatic home situations, and we're not adequately compensating them at a level that again, they could go do the same thing they're trained for somewhere else and get paid 2 or 3 times as much. So that's another issue. So we have a pipeline issue. We also have a number of overall slots that are funded. A lot of counties used COVID dollars or federal COVID dollars that came in to hire additional school health personnel staff during the pandemic. That money's gone, and so they've had to lose those positions. So we're actually at a space where we're losing counselors and nurses that we did have. So again, to answer that, we have shared recognition that it's an issue we need to invest in. We don't have shared recognition that we need to add the funding to make that happen. When it comes to early childhood education, that's one where it looks bleak some days, but I actually feel like we're on the cusp of really making some significant headway. So I have the privilege of sitting on the governor's task force for early childhood education and child care, along with the Republican Senate Appropriations Chair Ralph Heiss, and Republican Senate Health Chair Jim Bergen. Senator Bergen and the Lieutenant Governor co-chair the committee, and I am deeply proud that, so Neil, along with Leanna Martin, who is our early childhood education policy analyst, have been tapped by that task force for the last 6 months to do a lot of research around the work that we're doing, and we actually have recommendations that have come out of that task force that are supported by some members of Republican leadership to fund things like the subsidy floor, which we know would have significant impacts on Scotland County, as well as most of our rural counties in the state, for example. So we see a pathway there. It's a long and hard pathway. It's a lot of investment dollars, but that's definitely something where we're seeing a lot of movement. When it comes to the foster care issue, that's another space where I think there is a very strong shared recognition that we need to do something. That one's a little more complicated because it's unclear to folks exactly what to do, because it's not as simple as just adding more funding investment into a place. There are some places we're advocating right now to increase the amount that foster parents receive, because I can tell you, as a mom of an 8-year-old, if I had $22 a day in which to take care of her, she would not be living the lifestyle that she is currently living, and I would be struggling really, really hard. So we should be compensating those foster parents at more than $22 a day if we're asking them to take in these children who have had these really traumatic life experiences and take care of them well, so that they're not having to worry about finances. They can focus on taking care of the child. So there are some small solutions, but the reality is that one's just a lot more complicated. What I will say is that at NC Child, we've made it a strong priority of ours to put ourselves in a position where we can have influence with the legislature. And I'm really proud to say that we have really good relationships with a lot of members of our leadership. We have not been able to, do all the things that we want to do to solve a lot of these issues. But I think that we are unique in the fact that we are able to sit down at the table and to be in the room. And so I am ever hopeful that we will see movement in the coming years.
There was an article in the paper this week about Scotland County has the highest poverty rate of any county, 28%. That's got to be a direct correlation with a lot of your problems.
100%. And if you actually, I mean, just one example, right? If you're a single mom, or if you're a two-parent household, but you have children who are not school age yet, and you can't send them into a child care center because you can't afford child care. One of you can't work, or you can't work at all, right? If you're a single mom, or dad. So now you have a family whose income is $12 an hour. I'm not even talking minimum wage, right? Like just $12 an hour income. And you have a spouse who's watching your child at home because they can't go to work because you can't get child care. And what does your poverty rate look like then? Or again, you're a parent who can't go to work at all. That child who is experiencing hardship from growing up in an impoverished home is now going into the school system unprepared to learn because they didn't get the same opportunities that other children were able to get. So by the time they get to the third grade, their reading proficiency is not there, despite how much our teachers are trying to support them because they didn't have what they needed going into kindergarten, which is why we see early childhood education impacts last all the way into adulthood. We know that if a child doesn't get access to that, they don't earn as much when they're 25. I mean, but so their reading proficiency is lower. On top of that, the family doesn't have enough income to take care of what their child's basic needs are. And so then in some of those cases, you have higher substance use rates, you have all kinds of compounding issues that can lead to child welfare involvement. And we know that poverty, food insecurity, difficulty in school, all of those things compound into a child's mental health, creating that mental health crisis. So when you're looking, they are all so deeply interconnected. And yes, poverty is in many ways that one most significant unifying factor. Well, then I will take a couple minutes and I will ask you a question. And because we're in a pretty heavy space, I want to start out with this one. What's going on right now in Scotland County that, and no, I'll save it. I'm going to come back to that one. Let me first ask, was there anything in this that was particularly surprising? Because I think most of you kind of anecdotally, you knew what a lot of this was going to look like. Was there anything that you didn't know? Was there anything that was surprising, in a good or a bad way?
If you read the paper, how far down we are compared to other counties, I don't think any of this is right. And then they said the unemployment rate, we're the 8th lowest. So, you combine poverty with unemployment, that was the problem.
I said middle school suicide rates, I think that's surprising. Somebody asked that question differently. And I think we all think of that as a 15 to 20 college age problem, but that 10-year-olds are so bereft of any hope that they are taking their own lives is something that I think is hard for a lot of us to wrap our heads around.
So I'm going to go a little off script for a second and share something because we're not claiming causation here when I say this. But I will tell you that the date that we look at for when suicide rates started to drastically increase, where they've doubled, was 2010. We did not see that rate increase at that level prior to 2010. The other thing that happened in 2010 was social media took off. So, we don't have causation analysis data. So I'm not advocating for a policy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as a mom of an 8-year-old, my child is not going to have social media. And she's 8 now, so yeah. But I mean, when she's not getting a phone until she's got a car. I was going to put it that way. So, no, I look at this data every day. So like, she got a long argument with me. But I say that, and I know there's a lot of kids with Apple Watches that she goes to school with. I'm confused by that, but that's besides the point. But I am saying, in terms of your personal family lives, just a note that it's enough for me as a mom. Anything else that was okay? Well, then let me come back to this. So much of this data is so bleak. I would love to know locally here in Scotland County what's giving you hope. What do you see as a, outside of the policy space, what do you see as something that's helping us move forward? Again, I know that you all have the wonderful partnership with the elementary school.
Kids want books.
Yes, ma'am?
The kids want books. I think that's so hopeful.
Well, every church and organization is collecting food. We know that's a problem. And our wonderful new family promise program that gives families with children in poor homeless, and how it's been received in the community and supported is unique.
Well, the leadership of the place is positive in its outlook.
I'm so sorry, can you say that again?
The leadership is positive in its outlook. I mean, they haven't given up. They think that things can be addressed.
Well, I will say I think that's what we have to have before we can get anywhere else. So thank you for sharing that. Well, let me ask one other question. If you received a request to reach out to your legislator and share information, who would be willing to do that? All right, so I have another ask for you. Can we get your names and your email addresses before we leave? You don't have to answer that out loud, but we have a sign in over here. So we have a sign up over here. If you'll say that, what we'll do, we have a digest that comes out every 2 weeks, and there's our communications director always sends a really good message around what's going on right now, and then there's all kinds of resources and things like that. We'd love to share those with you because oftentimes you'll be able to learn something new or find a way that you can get involved. And then also what that will do is whenever we have a need to get some additional support from Scotland County representation, we can reach out to you and say, hey, we need your help, and we would love your help. So, any other questions that anyone would like to ask?
Think about the anomaly between a graduation rate in high school, which is quite good, and a low reading score in the 3rd grade. What happens?
So part of that is just simply these kids experience two different time frames. So the 3rd grade proficiency scores are reflective of children who started school when COVID was going on. The 91% high school graduation rate is reflective of children who never, who were in high school when that was going on. And so there's a difference there to a large degree. I think 3rd grade proficiency doesn't mean that you're proficient in reading when you graduate high school.
Well, that's my concern.
And that is an area where I'm not personally equipped to speak to that really well. I don't have the credentials to speak to K-12 academic standards. So I want to be careful that I don't overstep there. But I do think that what we see in the long term is that children who are not proficient in reading in the 3rd grade or who are not proficient in math in the 8th grade, regardless of high school graduation rates, have lower employment and lower income, and oftentimes lower health in adulthood than children who do. So just taking that out, we still know that regardless of whether they graduate, we have poorer outcomes for those children in their adulthood.
My great concern is that one of the answers that I can generate is that it's a pass-through. Regardless of what that score was, you go into the 4th grade, and then you go to the 5th grade.
Well, that I can say. I mean, when we only have half of the state's children right now, I mean, just the state level, it's I think, 53%? I could have that slightly off, but around 50% of the state's children are proficient in reading in the 3rd grade. 50% of our children are not getting held back in the 4th grade. So I can answer that one with confidence without having to, but in terms of graduation rates, I would not feel comfortable speaking to that per se. Yes, sir.
Should we expect then our high school graduation rates to decrease 8 years down the road?
May I actually pass that to the teacher?
And I'm sorry I opened this can of worms, because it is kind of a can of worms, but, if you talk to teachers, they do nothing but complain about that 3rd grade test. I know you talk to enough teachers and you know that. And yes, we change the high school requirements all the time. So one that we just changed this year that I think is a great one, we had a huge roadblock in Math 3. No child in the state was passing Math 3. The bright kids that were getting college scholarships were stuck in Math 3 for 2 times. So we changed the requirements for that class, for one class, that the state had gone to new higher standards without talking to any other people that were impacted by it, I think. Once they changed that requirement, the graduation rate shot up. Not for any bad thing, but just because there was one course that had been created that was mandated for everyone, no matter what your career goals were, that was unrealistic. Even Island students that had trouble with it when I was in the charter school, that were going off to high-name colleges with excellent SAT scores that struggled through Math 3 and had to take it twice. So there's so much give and take every year in what the state school board does and what they decide to throw in or throw out, that it really, it's turtles all the way down that.
So here's the only thing that I want to add to the kids who were with that reading proficiency score in 2023 in the 3rd grade are in 5th grade right now. There's a long road between 5th grade and 12th grade. And while right now I can't speak to any incredibly positive changes that are being made for those kids in middle school and high school, should we be able to address a lot of the factors impacting those children, from poverty rates to mental health care access to, name that, right? We can have a significant impact on where those 5th graders end up in 7 years. And so I don't want to sit in a space where we're thinking, okay, so this is what this is what this outcome is going to end up being, because we can have so much impact in the next 7 years on what happens to that child. And I will also say that's one of the things that's so core to NC Child. If I had a magic wand and could change the world, there's a lot I would do. But we try to operate in a space where we aren't just waiting for the one big answer that can come. We try to make sure it might seem incremental and it might seem small at times, but if we're able to pass a policy or get an investment that's helping some of those kids, that's helping them now. And so we try really hard to focus on the possibility of now and what we can do and what we can move. And so I hope, and I wouldn't be doing the job that I'm doing if I didn't believe that we can help that 5th grader who wasn't able to read proficiently do a lot better by the time they're in 12th grade. Thank you. Bob told me I was cut off at noon. It is noon. I'm going to hand him the microphone.
You are good. Erica, we're deeply grateful. A lovely, lovely time, very insightful. A short story. Bill Purcell Bill Purcell, when a pediatrician, a leading pediatrician in this town, a sainted human being who was down in our skilled nursing at this point. Bill Purcell was elected to the legislature, and he, hand in hand with North Carolina Child, made some real differences. We have a tradition. We have a connection. Every time I talk to Bill Purcell, we come back to North Carolina Child. It was a point of contact for him that became so, so critical. He represented children with you in the legislature. So we thank you for coming. We thank you for insights. We thank you for ideas. We thank you maybe for opportunities. Friends, go in peace.